Now we're going. So sorry, I must have left my little microphone on all night long and ran the batteries down on that because we just changed the batteries last week. But I apologize. Apologize to you guys on social media. I apologize to you guys on the radio. Um, but we're ready. We're ready to go now. I hope everybody had a great day. We had a super busy day at the Rock and lots of adjustments, lots of cool things going on. We had a good show last night. We talked about the autonomic nervous system, got some good feedback about that. I hope that made some sense to you guys. I left it right here so we could pick up right where we left off last night. But there is something I do want to talk about before we get going on the show. And it's just a statement that was said to me again this week. And it's 2 weeks in a row, basically. And it happens a lot of weeks in a row, to tell you the honest truth. Is I have a patient that told me that they were talking about a family member this time that has a bulging disc in their back, and they were told, because you have a bulging disc in your back, never to go to a chiropractor. And I just want everyone out there to know, if you're listening to this show, and you just so you have that knowledge, that is an ignorant thing to say. So whoever says that, whether it's the Dr. Fauci himself, the number one doctor in America, the number one guy at Baylor Medical, the number one guy at UMC in Lubbock, your medical doctor, your nurse practitioner, your physical therapist, whoever your person might be, your grandma, like whatever, whoever your person might be that says to you, you've got a bulging disc in your neck or your back, you should not go see a chiropractor, is ignorant. They do not know what they're talking about, nor do they have the authority to say that. They can say it, but they don't have any authority over anybody. So I just want you to know that, because I hate to see people suffer because of other people's ignorance. And there's things I don't know about dentistry, so I don't speak about dentistry. There's some things I don't know about orthopedic surgery or even neurology from that standpoint, and I don't speak about those things. And it's like, hey, if you want to go do that, go ahead. But for someone to say that, I've just felt bad, because that person, our person that I had last week had been dealing with chronic pain for 7 years. And they were told, don't go see a chiropractor because you had back surgery. And it's like, it's really foolish. It's very foolish. It's very ignorant. And you really ought to question your provider's knowledge base if they say that to you. I would just present for your consideration that if they say that to you, you should look at them and think, you know what, that's interesting, because you seem like you know what you're talking about, but that statement I know is false, right? And you guys know from what we went through last week, we went through the Texas board rules. What the rule is, I am governed by the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners. I am not governed by the Texas Medical Board. So the Texas in the state of Texas, we have our own board, the Texas Board of Chiropractic Examiners. They're the ones that hold my license, and they're the ones that keep me accountable for the things that I'm supposed to know and the things I'm supposed to do. They're the ones that I have to answer to when it comes to my scope of practice and the law. And they're the only ones. And so they have a standard that I have to meet, which I have exceeded for 20 years now. And my school that I went to school at, Parker College, which is now Parker University, like Parker College, just so you know this, there's an accreditation board that that our accreditation body that accredits. I don't know. You get accreditation from every university that is legitimate gets accreditation from this. It's something in the South. It's the same thing that Texas Tech and Texas A&M, the University of Texas, and all the schools in the South, the Southern Accreditation Boards. I don't know. It has some acronym that it has. I don't remember what it was, but the same entity that legitimizes Texas Tech University, and the same entity that legitimizes Texas University and A&M University and all of Abilene Christian and all the rest of them, is the same accrediting board that accredited Parker College of Chiropractic, which is now Parker University. Okay, and when we went through the accreditation, we got a perfect score and 3 commendations or whatever it's called. Like, we got patted on the back in 3 different areas of the academic standards that was at Parker College. And that's equal to or as high as any university in the United States as far as an accreditation board goes. So the education that we got at Parker, and part of the reason that I share all this stuff with you on the show is so that you'll understand a little bit better about my education. It was outstanding. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise and sports science from Texas Tech. I have a master's degree. I also went and took classes working towards my master's at New Mexico State University. My freshman year in college, I went to Eastern, New Mexico. Then I went to Texas Tech for 4 years. Then I went to New Mexico State. I was enrolled in there for 2 years. And then I came back and finished my master's in sports administration from Tech. And so, and then I went to Northlake Junior College, which was outstanding. I didn't even understand what that was, but it was outstanding to get prerequisites to go to chiropractic school. And then I went to chiropractic school. And I can tell you, my education at Parker College was second to none. It was really fantastic. From top to bottom, from administration to the admissions office, to the financial aid office, to the professors. Our professors would teach us. My anatomy teacher and my microbiology teacher and my biology teacher, my physiology teachers at Parker, they would teach us, and they would go across town to Southwestern Medical School and teach those kids. So the standard of education was great. It was great, and the state boards and the national boards that we took to get a license there's a standard, and we get held to that standard. And our board of chiropractic examiners is very strict. Like they don't let you slide on anything. So we have to do our due diligence when a patient comes into the office. We have to make sure that what we're doing is standard of care stuff, that we meet all the criteria. That person comes in. We had to learn 218 different, I don't know what it was, the number, 200 something different orthopedic tests. Like, our orthopedic test was from top to bottom. We learned neurological and orthopedic tests, and we have to have 16 hours of continuing education every year, which almost every single year I get way more than 16 hours, because some of the stuff that I get is not counted towards my board credits. So when a patient comes in, if they have a history of having a bulging disc, then I have a responsibility to see what's going on. If that person needs an MRI, if I need to refer that person out, if that person qualifies to be a chiropractic patient. And on top of that, when you practice functional neurology, there are lots of things that you can do for a person. There are a lot of things that you could do to help a person. That was one of the things I was working on today during a little time that I had. I was working on a presentation, and I'll just show you. I mean, I was working on our notebook that we give to patients, and I'll just show you this little section right here that has to do with the rehabilitation that we have in the office, and so I'll just show you what I was working on, and I'll read it to you, because and it's kind of small there, but I'll just read it to you. It says, we're talking about rehabilitation, right? It says it takes approximately 15 hours of brain rehab to make lasting changes. So as we're trying to build these new pathways, and this actually works fantastic for the show tonight, but when we're trying to build these pathways, it takes some time to change the neuroplasticity in the brain, which is what I'm about to go over. But it says this, and I put it straight off of the slide that from the seminar that I was in. It says, and this is my good friend Dr. Fraley in Ruidoso. I was just texting him right before the show started. But receptor-driven activation. We are dependent on receptor drive to initiate genetic responses. So if sufficient stimulus is received, the receptor on the nerve cell will fire and open the calcium channels, which will initiate immediate early gene response, thus allowing neurological change. Now, you're like, what does all that mean, right? What it means is that if you have enough stimulation, then you will open the calcium channels that will cause the nerve to fire, and you will make the neurological change. But this is my argument right here for the up and to the right and over to the left idea. You need it says here, if sufficient stimulus is received, the receptors on the nerve cell will fire and open the calcium channels, which will initiate immediate early gene response, thus allowing neurological change. And that's the argument that I make, is that we have insufficient stimulus to fire in that right hemisphere. So we're not opening the calcium channels. So we're not firing the information over to the left brain. The next paragraph says, the chances of allowing genetic response is dependent on special summation or firing a pathway from several different types of stimulus, or temporal summation, which is firing with increased frequency. This part of a motor learning issue, it requires repetition and intensity. It requires repetition and intensity. Okay, so what does that mean? And the picture I have right here is different ways to drive the brain. And these are all the cranial nerve sensory inputs that we can use to stimulate the brain. This is this sufficient stimulus that we need, and firing a pathway from several different types of stimulus. So when a person says, I've got a bulging disc, the question that I immediately say is why? Why is the disc bulging? Remember what we've talked about lots of times on the show, and if you're new to the show, then it might be a little bit, you might not have heard this before. Orthopedic problems are secondary to neurological problems. Orthopedic problems, my knee wore out, my hip wore out. Now, I'm not talking about acute injury problems, okay? Even though some of them are related to neurological problems. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about orthopedic problems in any joint, from your ankle to your knee to your hip, from all the way through your spine to your shoulders, your elbows, and your wrists. Anything that goes wrong in that joint went wrong after your brain wasn't working properly. I know you think that's crazy, and you may not even understand what I just said, but what I just said is true. It's a true statement. You don't have a bad knee before you have a bad brain. And if we could understand that as a society, we would understand the value of the neurological component that relates to the disc, the spine, the posture. Why is a disc bulging? A disc is bulging. We got a chemistry problem, and we have a movement problem. So we have abnormal force on the disc, which is causing the disc to break down, which is causing the disc to bulge. So what is the abnormal force? The abnormal force has a lot to do with intrinsic muscle tone, the cerebellum, the posture, the balance, the coordination, the motor cortex firing to the muscles, the nervous system first, right? The nervous system first. So if I have a person that's got a bulging disc in their low back, I may or may not adjust that segment, but I'm definitely going to address the neurological component that's going on. I am going to do the things. And this is what the slide right here is it showing the different ways to drive the brain, the different ways to increase the stimulus, as the slide says, from several different types. What are we going to do? We're going to move your eyes. We're going to put vibration on your arm. We may actually work on extension, and so that we can get the weight on the back of the vertebra. It doesn't mean I'm going to pop the bones. I'm not saying I won't, but but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Okay, there are lots of things you could do for a person that has a bulging disc. Plus, we've got a decompression table back there. So if that person qualifies for decompression, then we can take them back and put them on decompression. What does decompression mean? Decompression means to uncompress. What does compress mean? That means that the weight of the body is down on the disc. So it's being compressed. It's like, I hate to use this example on a wellness show, but it's like a little Debbie snack cake with the oatmeal cookies and the cream filling. You smash the two oatmeal cookies together, what happens to the cream filling? It bulges. So you're trying to take the pressure off. Another thing, a way to think of it, is a jelly donut. If you guys have ever seen a jelly donut before, they use a little syringe type thing to stick in the dough, and they fill that dough up with jelly. And then when they pull that little syringe thing out of there, that leaves a little hole, right? So when you eat a jelly donut, you know that there's that little hole on the side of the jelly donut. Okay, if I was to take my hand and I was to press down on the top of that jelly donut, what would happen to the jelly inside the donut? It would start to bulge out that little hole, right? Okay, how do I get it to stop bulging out of that hole? I got to take the pressure off of it. I've got to decompress the donut. Instead of compressing it, I've got to decompress it, which now creates what's called a negative pressure on the inside. If you press down, you increase the pressure inside the donut. If you decompress, you create a negative pressure which sucks the jelly back into the donut. Now, if you take your hand and you just smash that jelly donut and splatter that jelly all over the countertop, you're not going to be able to get that jelly back into that donut. That's what's called a ruptured disc. That's when the disc ruptures in layman's terms, right? So now you've got disc material floating around in the spinal canal. Okay, you're not coming to the chiropractic office if you come into my office and you have a disc that's basically exploded, you are in a 10 out of 10 pain, and there's nothing I can do to get you out of it. You're going to really, I might be able to move your eyes and dampen it. I might be able to do some tapping and dampen it. There might be some things I might could do to dampen that a little bit. But if that thing we got disc material in the spinal canal. Now, if we were stranded on an island somewhere and you did that, I could lay you down for 3 months and you could just get off your feet, and then it would heal eventually. Your body would absorb it and you would eventually heal, but you'd be in pain for a long time. That person is a surgical person in today's world most of the time. But there's 5 levels of disc injury, and that doesn't even start to happen until the middle of the 4th one. So we've got the first 3 levels of disc injury plus half of the 4th one before we even get into those serious types of situations. And we evaluate that before we do any treatment anyway. That's part of our responsibility. So the ignorance of somebody that says that, it's arrogance and it's ignorance. So I just want you to know it so that you can make a decision for yourself, right? What I would drive the brain. I would try to decompress the disc. I would try to stimulate the muscles that are supposed to hold the spine. I would try to stimulate the cerebellum to create balance and coordination and intrinsic muscle tone around the spine. and then we would try to see if we can solve that problem. Yeah, that's what we would do with that. Okay, enough of that already. But I want you to know it. So what we were talking about last night was we left off with pathways, and let me see where I was on that. I think it was there. It is. Okay, so we were talking about this last night because we were talking about what happens if we've been driving this autonomic nervous system for some time. We've been driving this fight or flight system for some time. What happens? We get what's called neuroplasticity. It's a pathway. And I use this picture for you guys on the radio. I've got a picture of a park, looks to me like, and then there's sidewalks in the park. And then there's places where when you're walking down the sidewalk, instead of, if you were going to go from one sidewalk to another sidewalk, it's kind of like that. I was talking to you about that movie Greater or whatever with Brandon Burlsworth from Arkansas. I watched this weekend. Great movie. You ever walked, like, you're walking down a sidewalk and you're going to get to the end of the sidewalk and you're going to turn right. So it makes a 90-degree curve right there. I mean, a 90-degree angle. And then, but a lot of times what people will do is they'll just cut it across the grass, right? Instead of walking down the sidewalk, they'll just cut right across the grass and then they'll hit the sidewalk on the other side. And that's what this picture right here is showing us. It's showing us where someone decided they just, instead of staying on the sidewalk, they were just going to cut right across the grass. Now, let me ask you a question. If you had a perfectly manicured yard, it was beautiful grass and it was perfectly manicured, and somebody walked across your yard, 2 days later, would you be able to tell that anybody walked across your yard? The answer is probably no, right? Like, if someone walked across your yard 2 days later, you probably wouldn't know that they walked across your yard. But what if they walked across your yard every single day? What if instead of going down and making that 90-degree turn, they cut across the grass? And then the next day they cut across the grass. And then the next day they cut across the grass. Pretty soon there'd be a rut in the grass going from one sidewalk to the other sidewalk, right? Well, then what happens? The next person walking down the sidewalk, they just automatically just take the cutoff, right? Instead of going all the way down to the end of the sidewalk and then turning right, if they're just walking down the sidewalk, and there's a rut that goes from one sidewalk to the next, they just have a tendency of just falling right into the rut and walking across the grass. That's kind of what happens in our brain. The more we fire a pathway, the more that pathway efficiency, the better that efficiency comes in firing that pathway, the easier it is to fire the pathway. Like you just fire it and fire it and fire it and fire it, and then now you're just going on autopilot. It's like driving to work the same way over and over for years. You can just basically just put it on autopilot and drive to work. You're thinking about 100 other things. You're thinking about the kids, or you're thinking about what you got to do today, or whatever it is that you got to think about, and then you just drive to work. And you might not even have remembered that you drove to work. I do the same thing every morning when I leave my house and make sure my garage door's closed. I will leave the house and then I'll start headed to work, and I'll think to myself, did I close the garage door? I'm like, dadgummit. So I have to turn back around and drive back around and see if I closed my garage door. And 100% of the time, I've closed my garage door. But I did not remember doing it. Why? Because it's just such autopilot right there. Our brains work the same way. And when we get back from the break, I'm going to explain to you how they work and what neuroplasticity is. So you guys stick around. We'll be right back. Yeah, that's when that's when I discovered that you really can't be 98% sure, or 99% sure, or 70%. I'm 70% certain I close the garage. I'm 95% certain I close the garage door. I, if you're 95% certain that you close the garage door and you turn around to check and see if you close the garage door, it doesn't even make any difference, right? That's what I've done. I've done that before. And it's like, you know what? I'm not 98% certain. I'm 0% certain that I closed it. That's why I turned around to come back and check and see if I closed it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have closed it. If I was 98% certain, I would have just gone on with it. I know. I know y'all think about stuff like that too. But if you didn't see the movie, and if anybody of you did, you can send me a message. Say, yeah, I saw that movie. It's a great movie. Greater, I think is what it was called. Brandon Burlsworth, he was an offensive lineman at the University of Arkansas. And he walked on. He dreamed of playing for Arkansas from the time he was a little kid. And he was just kind of a little chubby, out of shape, Cheeto eating kid. But he said, one of these days I'm going to be a Razorback. I'm going to play for Arkansas. And he just grew up and tried out that he wasn't specimen enough to play college offensive lineman. And but they gave him a chance, and he became an All-American by the time he was a senior. It's a good show. You could watch it. It has a sad ending, but you could watch it. It's a good show. But about what I was saying about the show was Brandon would not walk on the grass. And that's so funny because I'm one of those guys that won't walk on the grass either. So I've done that. I laughed when he did it because that's the same thing I would do. A group of guys walking down the sidewalk, my friends would just take off and cut across the corner, and I'd go down to the end and I'd make the 90-degree curve. I was like, don't walk on those people's grass. And Brandon was the same way. He was like, he'd walk down, all of his teammates would cut across the grass, and Brandon, he'd just walk down there and make the turn. He's like, nope, not going to do that. I thought that was funny. I laughed when that happened. So, okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We're talking about neural pathways and plasticity. And so if you're burning one of these pathways that leads to stress, you're burning, you've been in a stressful situation for a long period of time, then what you're doing is you're firing these pathways so many times that they become more efficient in their firing pattern. And if the end result of firing that pathway leads you to this over-sympathetic response, remember the fight or flight response, it makes you very upset. You get mad, you get defensive, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, all those things that we talked about last night on sympathetic stress. Then what happens is we've got to get the grass to grow back like it's supposed to. So what would you do if it was your responsibility as a groundskeeper to try to get this grass to grow back in between these sidewalks? Like, how would you handle that? Well, first thing you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to put up some cones and maybe a rope or something, a sign, keep off the grass, and then you're gonna have to put up a barrier of some kind to stop people from walking across the grass, right? Like you're going to have to do something. The first thing you're going to have to do before you start to repair the rut that people have caused, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get them to quit walking across there, right? Well, the same thing happens with us in neuroplasticity. Whichever pathways we repeatedly fire, they become sensitized and they fire quickly. They just keep firing. If we constantly think unbalanced, anxious thoughts, we express stress physiology and biochemistry more quickly and efficiently. So we've got to break the pathway of that neuroplasticity. We've got to break the pathway so that we can reroute the nervous system around that sympathetic pathway. And one of the coolest ways that you can start to do that is to get adjusted. Because if you imagine that your spine, and I use this example a lot, is on one of those old briefcases, and you guys might not even be old enough to know this, but on one of those old briefcases, I used to have one, they had a little lock on both sides. It was a 3-digit combination, and you had the little numbers, and you had to set the numbers to your combination on each side before you could unlock the briefcase. Right? You guys remember that? So when you got ready to, when you shut it and you locked it, then you just pushed down the numbers and messed them all up. And that way you couldn't unlock it. Your combination was messed up, right? Well, that's the same thing that happens when you get adjusted, because remember the 3 trillion bits of information per second that's going into your brain? One of the questions I got today was, I've got ringing in the ears. And after I get adjusted, my ringing of the ears seem to go away for a day or two, and then they come back. And then when I get adjusted again, the ringing of the ears go away. And I'm like, yeah, because what's happening is you're not receiving all of the 3 trillion bits of information properly, and now you're not able to stop your ears from ringing. And then once you get adjusted, and then you go over and do your brain exercises, then what happens is we increase the input into the brain, and now it dampens the ringing of the ears, right? So getting adjusted, when we go in there and adjust your spine from top to bottom, it's like running your fingers over the top of that little combination lock. Now you can't get there. It's like you've changed the pathway. You've changed the pathway to stress. It makes it harder. Now you can force your way through there and make yourself stressed out, but it makes it harder for you to get stressed out because I just went through your entire spine. And I start with your occiput, and then you've got 24 bones below that. Then you've got a sacrum and a pelvis, and we get into your shoulders, your elbows, and your wrist. So when we adjust your spine, like we're adjusting the entire spine from top to bottom, and that's changing it. And then there's other things that we can do. We can start to fire. Number one, we want to stop these anxious thoughts. And we can either do that consciously. We can tell ourselves about, look, I'm going to start to speak positive stuff. I'm going to watch my tongue. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to say my prayers, whatever my thing is. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to make sure that I've changed my language a little bit about myself, about the day. It's so funny. Texas Tech blew up 2 weeks ago, right before spring break. Had a massive explosion deal underneath the tunnels at Texas Tech, messed up a bunch of stuff. And I've got several Texas Tech people that have come in this week to get adjusted. And the power went back out on Monday. It's a mess over there. They're trying to get it all fixed, but there's some stuff. It's been very interesting to me to listen to the description of the event by the different people that work at Tech. And it's on the full spectrum. I've got the guys that are trying to fix all the stuff, describing to me what's going on over there. And I've got the people that don't have anything to do with fixing it. They're just having to deal with the repercussions of it and the things that they say. And the language is completely different. The event is neutral. The event just is the event, right? But what I'm getting a broad spectrum of language from these people that are working over there. Some of them are very, very negative about what's going on. It's how it's affecting them and how it's ruining their day and how it's doing all this stuff. And then some people are very, very optimistic and challenged and trying to fix it and see what's going on and working themselves, 18 hours a day trying to fix that thing over there. And the language is different, right? Well, the language and the definition is going to either move us towards sympathetic response or it's going to move us towards parasympathetic rest and recover, right? I can either stay calm and work out the details, or I can get very anxious about the situation. And so if you're in a situation where you're overstimulating your sympathetic nervous system, breathing, take a breath, take some, if you guys ever heard of box breathing, we've talked about that before. You probably know what it is. Take a breath in, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and repeat. Box breathing. It changes your nervous system. It calms you down. Like, you just do it a couple times. Don't do it all day, but just do it a couple times. It'll start to calm you down. Understand, try to get a bigger picture of things. Try to see the whole picture instead of just your little part. Another thing you can do is try to do something for someone else. The guys over here that are trying to do something for the whole campus and trying to work as hard as they can, they really don't have any time to complain about the things that are going on. So the ones over here that aren't doing that, they've got more time to complain, which is leading them to more stress, right? I don't care which one you do, but you might particularly not want to be stressed, right? So we want to try to change that neuroplasticity, right? We want to try to fire it. It's difficult to focus on balanced, empowering thoughts in a time of chronic stress because the neuroplasticity develops along this amygdala locus coeruleus HPA axis. We are more sensitive and overreactive because the pathways are literally sensitized. So we don't want to do that. We want to change it. Here's a sentence that people are sensitized to. It's really hard to quit sugar. That's just a definition. Matter of fact, it's a made-up sentence that is not true. It's not really hard. To me, it would be way harder in my current condition to climb Mount Everest, Machu Picchu, Kilimanjaro, all those places that people go climb stuff. Like my uncle climbed Kilimanjaro one time, then ran a marathon the next day or something like that. I was like, holy cow! Like that to me would be hard. Like, to climb Mount Everest today would be really hard versus not eating sugar. Quitting sugar is not really that hard. I've done it. It's not really that hard. But we say it is, and therefore we burn a pathway in our brain that supports it, and then we keep saying it, and then we keep supporting it, right? Well, if we're really stressed out, we've got this whole right side hemisphere fired up. It's really hard to get ourselves to calm down. One of the things we could do is go for a walk. Another thing you could do is get some sunshine on you. It's been beautiful in Lubbock the last 3 or 4 days. 80-something degrees, almost 90. It's beautiful out there. Go for a walk in the sunshine. Drink an extra bottle of water. Like, get a few more healthy calories. Try eating a handful of pistachios or macadamia nuts or something like that. Like, see if you can create an environment that just kind of calms you down just a little bit. And then once you do that, now you can start to work on these pathways and change these pathways. This is why it's so important to develop resources to deal with adversity and develop neuroplastic changes along balanced, empowering, solution-centered pathways of thought on a daily basis. Creating these skills is difficult when you're under lots of stress. Okay? So that's the biggest part of these pathways that I want to. I'll go. Shoot. Let's see. Yeah, pathways. The only way to break a stress response initiating unbalanced. This one is an important slide. The only way to break the neuroplasticity on these unbalanced pathways is to create a new neuroplasticity along a balanced, empowering pathway. Drugs cannot do this. They can only artificially supply the neurotransmitter or inhibitor, but this can never create a healthy pathway. An antidepressant or an anti-anxiety drug is not going to solve the problem of neuroplasticity. All it's going to do is it's going to block the pathway. So those drugs that we take for anxiety and all that stuff, because I'll ask you the question, what happens when you quit taking the drug? Your anxiety comes back, right? Why? Because the pathway is still firing. It's just running into a wall. If the pathway is firing and running into a wall that's being blocked or interfered with the drug. But as soon as you take the drug away, then the pathway continues to fire and you're right back into the anxious issue. It's treating the symptom, not the cause. If you treat the cause, then you fix the problem. And what you were told is that you have a chemical imbalance. That's why you have anxiety. That's why you have depression. That's why you have bipolar, all that. So you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. And it's true, but it's misleading. You do have a chemical imbalance. I have a chemical imbalance in my stomach right now because I'm hungry. Right? I didn't eat lunch today. And it's 6:46. And Leslie's making some sweet potatoes and some grilled chicken tonight. So the chemistry, the chemicals in my stomach are different right now than they're going to be in 45 minutes from now. Right? Chemicals change. Well, the same thing happens in your brain. Whenever you're running these stress pathways, you're stuck in the right hemisphere and you're stuck in this fight or flight sympathetic response, the chemistry changes in your brain. Well, if you take an SSRI or some sort of anxiety medication, does it move the chemistry along? Yeah, it'll help with chemistry on the other side of the brain, but it doesn't stop the pathway that's going. But it's not because you have a chemical imbalance. It's because you have a neuroplasticity imbalance. It's because your brain is not getting to fire like it's supposed to fire. Because I promise you, as soon as you fire the pathway properly, then all of a sudden your anxiety goes away. And when your anxiety goes away, then you don't have that, all of a sudden you don't have that chemical imbalance anymore. So anyway, and let me move past that slide. I didn't mean to give that slide out. But this is a great example in my life of a picture. For you guys on the radio, I got a picture of a bunch of looks like Dairy Queen stuff. I got some sort of parfait and a banana split and a sundae and a blizzard looking thing. Is a whole picture of a bunch of M&Ms or Reese's cups around them or something. It looks like delicious. Right? Okay. For 50-something years of my life, if I saw that picture, if I was driving down the highway going to Dallas, and they had a big old billboard up there with a Dairy Queen Blizzard on it, and I saw that with my eyeballs, that would fire a pathway in my brain that would make me exit at the next exit that there was a Dairy Queen to stop and get a Blizzard. If I was going to Roswell and I thought about going through Plains, if I even thought about going through Plains where there was a Dairy Queen, I'm like, I'm about to go through Plains. There's a Dairy Queen. Am I going to stop? That started the pathway. And what happened was I ended up at Dairy Queen and I got a Blizzard. I got a Reese's peanut butter cup with cookie dough and a splash of chocolate syrup. That was my order for 50-something years. I don't know. It was as an adult. That was my order. And then, are you going to get a medium or are you going to get a large? Well, why would you waste time getting a medium? If you're going to stop anyway, you might as well get a large, right? That's the pathway that was going through my head. I would see the picture. I would stop at the Dairy Queen. I no longer have that pathway in my head. The grass has grown up along the pathway. This is better as a memory. I love the memory of when I used to love to eat that poison. I love the memory of it, but the poison doesn't affect me anymore. I literally can look at that picture. I can look at those little Reese's Pieces. I can look at that banana split or that chocolate sundae, and I can appreciate the beauty of the picture and have no pathway there. I'm walking down the sidewalk and I'm making the 90 degree on the other sidewalk, and it doesn't affect me whatsoever. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me a bit. It doesn't change anything. So I'll go over this. I wasn't going to go through this tonight, but since we're here, I might as well just finish this little section of the slide show. I learned this from Dr. DeMartini. It's a great concept right here. And if I was to ask you, what happens when you cut a magnet in half? The answer to the question is you get two magnets. You get a positive, there's a positive and a negative in a magnet, right? Well, if you cut that magnet in half, what you do is you get two magnets. There's a positive and a negative and a positive and a negative. And if you cut one of those magnets in half, then it's the same thing. You get two more magnets, a positive and a negative. And if you just keep slicing that magnet as thin as you can slice it, and you get to the very thinnest slice that you can possibly slice, what you'll find out is that the positive and negatives are right next to each other, and they always are. There's never a positive without a negative. The universe is balanced. Half the people love me and half the people hate me. It's just the way it works. Some people think I'm great and some people think I suck. Like, it's just the way it works. The good thing about, I told JT tonight, the good thing about my day is that I don't usually get to spend most of it with the people that think I suck, right? Like, that's great. It makes it more pleasant. But I know they're out there. It wouldn't take 5 minutes to find a whole list of people that don't think much of me. And there's a whole list of people that do like me. It's not relevant either way, but it's balanced. We get caught up in our day seeing half the magnet. A lot of times I'll ask somebody, how's your day? Oh, my day is awesome. And every time they say that, they're not really paying attention to the other side of their day that sucked. And I don't bring it up either, but I'm not going to go have them go search for that part. But when they come in and they say, oh, my day sucked. This was just horrible. I try to point out, hey, you know what happens when you cut a magnet in half? And they're like, what? And I was like, you get two magnets. Only half of your day sucked. The other half of your day didn't suck. You just can't see that other half of your day. Life is balanced. God did not disappear. Where is God not? That was the question that was asked. Okay? So if you're having a bad day, just stop for a second and breathe and see if you can find the other side of the magnet. See if you can find the things that went positive in your day to bring you back to the middle where the love is. That's the middle of the sine wave. And so there was a really cool book, and I haven't gone over this in a long time, but there's a really cool book called Halftime by Bob Buford. And Bob Buford was a millionaire in the cable television industry. I think he's from Tyler, Texas. He was a millionaire, and he got to 50 years old, and he was just kind of like, what am I supposed to do now? I got millions of dollars in the bank. I've got the house at the lake. I've got the house in the country, in the city. I've got the helicopter. I've got all the stuff. I got fancy cars. Like, what do I do now? Is this it? And so he was looking for something else to do, but he wasn't sure. So he hired an advisor that deals with really big companies like Coca-Cola and IBM and things like that. And Bob Buford hired this advisor, and he went to some, weekend retreat, something deal with him, and he laid out his portfolio to the guy. And one of the things it's a Christian book, and Bob is a Christian guy, and he really wanted to do something to serve Jesus, but he didn't want to give up all of his business knowledge, so he was kind of stuck. And so the advisor asked Bob, he said, hey, I got a question for you. He said, what's in your box? And Bob was like, what does that mean? And he said, if I had a box that was sitting right here, and you had to tell me the most important thing, is it money or is it Jesus? Is there a cross or is there a dollar sign in the box? Which one is it? Because This guy was an atheist, by the way, but he didn't care about either one of those. But he said, I really can't advise you which direction to go unless you tell me what's in the box. And so he said, is it a cross or is it a dollar sign? Which one's in your box? Because once you tell me the answer to that question, then I'll tell you which way you should go with your future, in my opinion. And so Bob thought about it for a while, and he was like, there's some things, there's a cross in the box, but there are some things I want to do, but the answer is there's a cross in the box, right? And so the guy said, okay, well, based on that piece of information, this is what I think you ought to do. And then at the end of the chapter, Bob says, look, he always asks you some questions at the end of the chapter, and he said, here's the question, what's in your box? And he would ask us. And I remember where I was sitting at the Starbucks. I'd taken Jacob to go get guitar lessons, and I was waiting for him, and I was sitting at the Starbucks over in 82nd and University here in Lubbock, and I was outside, and I was thinking about the answer, what's in my box? And I know this is going to sound really arrogant, because the first time I told my partner this, he looked at me and was like, yeah, I know. But I started thinking about that, and what I really started thinking about was, I said, what's in my box? And I just wrote Jason in the box. And let me explain that before you think I'm really arrogant, because I just got to thinking about the best me that there is and where that source of energy comes from. God created me in this time and place for a reason. I was born in Winsboro, Texas in 1970 for a reason. Like, I was born at this time of existence for a reason. And there's only been one of me ever. So that dude inside the box knows where his source of life comes from. That Jason inside the box is a good dude. He's a good son. He's a good brother. He's a good father. He's a good husband. He's a caring person. He's a good guy. But this Jason out here on the outside is a punk. And this Jason over here is lazy. And this Jason over here is mean. And this one is arrogant. And like all these Jasons on the outside are this illusion that I make up sometimes of myself. It's a lie. These are all lies that are outside the box. Because the Jason in the box is run by an innate intelligence, which is a piece of God himself. And it's like, he's a good dude. And when I started thinking about, okay, what would Jason do? What would I do? Humble and knowing where my source comes from. If I have a situation, how should I handle this situation? What should I do with my minutes? What should I do with my days based on that? Not based on this fat guy over here, or this lazy guy over here, or this guy that doesn't understand things over here. Not those guys, because that's a lie, right? And I'm going to present for your consideration that there's a you inside that box. There's a perfection. You are the only one of you that's ever existed on the planet, ever. We think snowflakes are fancy, and snowflakes can't hold a candle to the original you that's in the box. And if you could find that piece of that goes along with that knowledge to say, yes, I am divine driven. There's an innate intelligence that fires these cells, that directs these cells. It will bring an inner peace to yourself that will bring health to your body. I really believe that. I believe there's a perfect you. And that's what we work on every day to try to find. I didn't mean to get off into that all the way. I just wanted to go over pathways, but I think it ended up pretty cool. And we're out of time. So I hope it works out. I hope it makes something. I hope you got something for this. And thanks for watching the show. Thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. You guys have a good night.